I'll introduce myself. My name is Mark Jenkinson. I'm on the board of the South East London Chamber with a focus of driving sustainability across the 5 boroughs which the Chamber covers. So that's obviously Greenwich, Bromley, Bexley, Lewisham and Croydon. And this is part of a series of events following on from the Greener Greenwich Summit, which certainly Mercedes was at for your party, and maybe one or two of you also. And basically, just to give you, to remind you, and for those that weren't there, we had 4 themes for the day, and we came up with 4 projects and or initiatives to really help Greenwich, who can meet its carbon neutral plan, or support Greenwich to meet its carbon neutral plan. And the 4 projects were around developing a green travel plan, looking at the energy efficiency and decarbonisation of your buildings, whether it's home or office, and also working more closely around green skills with the FE for further education, the colleges and universities across the borough. So those are the 3. But this particular one was all about, we had this ambition, which was voted for by the people at the conference, of how do we get all businesses within Greenwich to develop a carbon reduction plan. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Marta. And Marta is the manager for Green Business Action London. I'll let Marta describe and tell you a bit more about that. And clearly at the end, we'll have lots of time for your questions about the program and also about the content. And also, it'd be also good to hear from some of you from your experience and where you are on the net zero journey. So over to you, Marta.
Thank you very much, Mark. Hi, everybody. My name is Marta Martinez. As Mark was saying, I head the Green Business Action London program, the team. We've got different sustainability initiatives going on. We help SMEs around London to hit their net zero targets for free, as we are publicly funded. So I'm just going to share my screen. And hopefully you can all see that correctly.
Yeah.
So what I will do today is I'll start with giving you some context. Why is net zero good for business? This is very similar to what we talked about in Greener Greenwich. So I'll just do a bit of a recap of what I spoke about there, just the context and so on. Then I'll go into the program and what our support journey looks like. And then I'll actually guide you through some of the steps in your sustainability journey. What's a carbon footprint? How do you measure it? And what would be the final step in that journey? And then towards the end, I can open the room for some questions if people have them. And I'm also happy to take a few in the middle, because I'll get a little bit technical, not too much, but if people have any urgent questions, I'm very happy to take them. So why is net zero good for business? I'll start with this not very fun graphic. I also showed it at Greener Greenwich. This is the flooding risk areas in London by 2030. So as you'll see, Southeast London is very much a vulnerable area. This is just to explain how climate change can affect your business. On a physical level, we've seen a lot of flooding. These are just some local businesses we've worked with in Hackney and Tower Hamlets. So we've seen how this has literally physically affected their business. If this happens to you, what do you do if your business is flooded? How do you get to work? How do you get your employees to work and stay working and active? Another risk that companies are definitely facing, and I also spoke about this at the Greener Greenwich Summit, is the energy cost. I think someone might have forgotten to mute themselves. If you wouldn't mind doing that, that'd be fantastic. But another risk that we spoke about was the energy costs. As you see here, there was a massive peak in 2022. We worked with a lot of businesses that were struggling with the energy crisis. This is also just to show how external risks and external circumstances can affect what you pay for your energy, what your business costs are. In this specific scenario, some of the circumstances that affect prices were the war in Ukraine. Also, when it gets very cold in China, this is a fun fact, China uses up a lot of that gas, so it increases in price and can also affect what we are paying for gas in the UK. So this is just another risk to be aware of, and a reason why sustainability and decarbonization are a really good idea for businesses. Some of the reasons why your business should commit to net zero: the UK and London have both committed to net zero by 2050 and 2030 respectively. We are very much aligned with London's target for net zero. We invite our businesses to also pledge that goal for their own organizations. I'll go into what net zero means a bit later as well. A lot of corporates are legally required to disclose their emissions, and they are asking their own suppliers to do so more and more within their procurement policies and so on. And finally, for tendering, so if you're applying for any big contracts with the government, any worth 5 million or above, you will need to have a reduction strategy in place. I know that some local authorities are also asking for a reduction plan for their contracts. So it's definitely an increasing need and an increasing requirement from your clients, from the wider audience, from government, and so on. Finally, this little graphic of how net zero can affect all areas of your business. So your own business, as I was showing before, its physical premises, its continuity, its costs, but also your competitors, customers, your contracts, and also your suppliers. So we've seen how net zero can affect all of these aspects in a very short time, and what's the context. Having that in mind, we obviously understand that net zero as a word and as a concept can be a little bit overwhelming for businesses, specifically for smaller businesses that may not have a massive team to deal with issues like sustainability, procurement, and such. So that's where we come in to help. So we are Green Business Action, and we've got our Better Futures program, which I'll be focusing on today. And this is a free program. We're subsidized by the UK government, and we provide sustainability and energy support to London small and medium enterprises. And our mission is to help businesses become greener, become more efficient, more sustainable, and so on. That's just a QR code to our website, but I'll very happily leave contact details at the end as well. So some of the support that we offer, we can help with carbon footprint measurement and then creating a carbon reduction plan. We've got some energy support as well, so we can do an energy health check. We can go and visit your premises, just give you some recommendations about what might be the measures that you need to implement to reduce consumption. And then we can then help you find funding if it is available. We've got bespoke consultancy and other types of support that we can pay for through non-capital grants. No capital expenditure grants, apologies. And finally, we've also got a learning portal and a lot of live events and online events as well, to just try to demystify sustainability, tell you and teach you what it means in very basic terms, just kind of how I'm doing right now, very conversational, very much open to questions, and keeping in mind that a lot of people may not have heard about it or might feel a bit that this is a very daunting topic. These are some of those topics that we cover. We do a lot around energy. We cover transport, green finance, innovation and design is also one of the things that we talk about a lot, and policy, how to develop your own policies internally. Sustainability strategy or a procurement policy, it doesn't have to be a 60-page long document. It can just be a checkbox that you include when you buy from your suppliers. It can just be something that you put in your staff handbook and that you start introducing in your practices. So it doesn't have to be a massive project. We can help make it easier and doable for smaller organizations as well. So we do have some eligibility criteria due to our nature of being funded by government, because we cover SMEs, so small and medium companies. They have to have at least 2 full-time equivalents. So if the company has a number of part-timers or a lot of contractors that could count as a full-time employee, we're happy. We've got some flexibility around that. Our revenue threshold is £7,000, although we reduce that for diverse founders and also for charities and social enterprises. You do need to be registered or trading in London. And if you are, if you aren't, which I'm assuming most of you here are, if you've got any big clients in London or you trade a lot there, for example, we've got a lot of people that have a lot of business at Heathrow. We're also happy with that, and we are totally sector agnostic. So this is our support journey. Apologies, because I know it might look a little bit small on your screen, but I'll just focus on these big words over here. So when you come on our program, when you sign up to Better Futures, we have a registration form that we would send with a few questions, just basically to know if you're eligible to receive the support. We would then book a call with you just to find out what support you're looking for, how we can help specifically in your case. Then we would invite you to attend our online and in-person events. And this would start with a welcome session, an introduction to Carbon, and get a little bit more in depth, looking into things like your supply chain strategy, your policies, and so on. All of this content is also available on our learning platform. Actually, Mark, I'm sure, is going to get very familiar with our learning platform because he's now signed up for it. So he'll be able to let everyone know what he thinks about it. And then we've also got access to a carbon calculator, which I'll show in a second, where we provide access for free for 12 months. And we give you guidance on how to use it and what kind of data you need to put on it. How do you prioritize the main strategies to go for? Finally, if there's any specific issues that you're dealing with or any specific project that you want to take on with regards to sustainability in your organization, we can put you in touch with specialist consultants and pay for up to 1 day's worth of their time. Once all of this support is completed, once you've implemented a strategy or put together a policy, we've got a badge system. We can give you a badge for participating in the program. We've got case studies, and we'll introduce you to our network of businesses. We have supported more than 500 businesses to date. We've been running this program for a few years, and there's a lot of really interesting connections that arise from networks like that, for sure. So I've shown what the journey and the process is. Now I'd like to, obviously I can't get a physical show of hands. I don't know if people would be able to raise their hand in the meeting, put something in the chat, or just let me know. Do you know what a carbon footprint is? Are you familiar with that? Mark, I see your hand is up, and Helen as well. I usually do this in a physical space so that I can literally see the people, but I can see there's more hands up. That's really, really great. If you don't, that's fine. That's what we're here for. Sometimes people keep their cameras off and they say, I don't want to say anything because I'm supposed to know this. You're not actually. It's something that a lot of people don't know about. It's a word, it's a concept that it's fairly new, and it's now getting introduced to SMEs and smaller organizations. So a carbon footprint is a calculation that estimates your greenhouse gas emissions, which are generated by doing any activity. So as you'll see in this foot that I've got on the screen, it can be the waste that you produce. So how is that waste processed? There's an emission that comes from that. It can be the transport that you undertake in your company. If you've got any vehicles that belong to the company, the fuel that powers them, it can be the electricity or the gas that powers your office. All of that has a sort of life cycle to get to the point where you use it, and then to get to the point where you can let go of it and put it to waste. All of that life cycle creates what is called a carbon footprint and those greenhouse gas emissions. So there's different things included in your carbon footprint. The way I like to see it is it's how direct those emissions are, or how much power you've got over those emissions. So in these 3 scopes, we've got scope 1, that's your direct emissions. This would be the fuel that you need to burn to do any of your activities. So if you've got any company vehicles, you're burning the fuel to run the vehicles, or if you've got gas in your offices to heat up the space, that would be in your scope 1. In your scope 2, it would be a bit more indirect. You're paying a supplier to give you some energy. In this case, this would be your electricity use. That would be your scope 2. And finally, your scope 3 is literally everything else. These are very indirect emissions. You don't always have power over them. They're very dependent on your suppliers. So for instance, it could be your waste provider. You don't really get to choose how your waste provider treats your waste, but you can always choose to select a waste provider that's a little bit more sustainable, or that tries to recycle most of it, or not to send anything to landfill. It can be other categories such as your business travel, any investments, and in general, it's anything you buy, anything you sell, and any services that you use. So for instance, your Microsoft Office subscription, that would go in your scope 3. A lot of this is related to the money that you spend. We think that's a very easy way of calculating your footprint. So usually whatever you spend most money on will be what's also your most emitting category in your organization. So once we have an understanding of what a carbon footprint means and what's included in it, using our carbon footprint software, which is called Climate Essentials, you can actually calculate your carbon footprint, and you can see it by the scopes that I just explained. You can see it by categories, and you can then start looking at what's your biggest impact and how can you start tackling that. So I've just shown this, which is the results, or the dashboard for your footprint. There's a few steps to get to this point. The software would ask you things like, how much money have you spent on gas in the past year? How much money did you spend in ink cartridges and things like that? And knowing that, it will calculate this carbon baseline for you. So your baseline would be the first year that you're basically deciding, you're taking accountability for your emissions, and you're putting that as your base for then whether you go up or down in your sustainability journey. In this case, we've got most emissions coming from scope 3. So as I mentioned before, that would be things like the products that we purchase, the waste that we produce, the software that we use, etc. And knowing that, we can then start making a strategy to reduce that. So a way that you can go about doing that is to try to identify the areas where you can really make an impact. What we like to say is that if you target your top 20% of your emissions, you're going to make a much higher impact than if you target the rest of your 80% of emissions. Just thinking about scale and how you can really make an impact with your footprint. So 2 ways that you can do that. You can either select the main activities that you have, or the main things that you spend money on. In this case, we've got, for instance, as an example, your gas bill. So that's going to be the most impactful activity that you do. And then you can calculate using our calculator the footprint and what's the percentage out of your total footprint. Although a way that I really like to do this with our businesses is just by spend. So we may have a supplier that works very closely with Amazon. They spend a lot of money on them. They're probably the main thing they spend money on. So we can put down how much money we spend in a year and the percentage of spend. Usually that will be related to what is your your biggest emitter as well. I'm getting very much into the different steps in your carbon reduction plan, just as a deep dive into it. But this is obviously something that we could explore step by step. You know, it's a much more slow way in one-to-one sessions, or also in group sessions in our program. But one of the other things that we can help with is choose you which interventions that you can prioritize. We've got some spreadsheets and also sessions where you can set up and set out the different interventions that you've selected, and then select which employee is gonna do them, what's the impact of those interventions, and knowing what's the main one, you can select what to start with. Obviously, if it's feasible, if the risks aren't too high, and so on. There's a lot of different aspects to taking on these different interventions. Some of them might be very easy. For example, if your waste provider contract is coming up this year, why not change it to another waste provider that is a little bit more sustainable? Likewise with your electricity or your gas. However, with those, it could also mean that you have to pay a little bit more. So there's a lot of different aspects to consider, but we can always start with what's easiest and then get into the more complex ones. So once you've got your footprint to begin with, your baseline, and then you've selected those main interventions that you want to prioritize, you then have different options as to which way you want to go with your emissions. So you will start with a footprint in your baseline year, and you can then choose if you want to be carbon neutral, if you want to be net zero. There's also the option to go carbon positive, although I would say not to start with that. That's really, really ambitious. So carbon neutral basically means that what you release into the atmosphere is balanced by removing that. So in this case, we would talk about offsets quite a lot. So if your emissions are 10 tons in 2024 of CO2, then you would just offset those 10 tons of CO2. There's a lot of things also to consider with offsets, making sure that they're new offsets, that you're not just taking a random tree and saying, oh, this tree is capturing CO2, so we're definitely offsetting our emissions. You actually need to grow a new tree, you need to make an impact in biodiversity. So we also help a little bit with advising in that sense. But what we always recommend the businesses that partake in the program is that they pledge net zero, just because net zero means that if we go back to those 10 tons of CO2, you will choose to reduce all of those emissions to the point of almost zero. So it can be up to 90%. And then you can offset the rest of those emissions, which might be really difficult to reduce. So how do you reduce your emissions? It can be through things like, as I mentioned before, moving to renewable energy providers, selecting more sustainable suppliers. It can be trying to fly less if you're a company that flies a lot, or trying to select more sustainable modes of transport. So there's different actions that can really help you bring down those emissions. And then we understand that as small companies, there's always going to be a bit of those emissions that are really, really difficult to reduce. So then you can revert to offsetting those as well. So then we move on to a carbon reduction plan. As I was saying, you've got your carbon footprint, you've got your initiatives that you want to take on, and now you actually have an objective for them. So let's say you want to become net zero by 2030, as London's government also wants to do. So with a carbon reduction plan, you set your baseline on it and you set your plans to reduce it. So you'll say, my company has 10 tons of CO2 that we produced in 2024. By 2030, we want to get to net zero. And then you will explain what you've already done to get to this target, but also what you're planning to do in the future. This needs to be approved by the most senior level of management, and it also needs to be published on your website or your networks in order to be considered kind of official. So as I was mentioning before, this is required now when applying for procurement for major government contracts. And it's also increasingly asked for in corporates' procurement policies. We've actually spoken to a lot of corporates that have shared their procurement strategies or policies, and they will choose to move away from suppliers if they don't have any sustainability targets in place. So it's definitely a trend that's moving forward and increasing in that way. Another step that you can take, and you don't actually need to have a written carbon reduction plan to do so, is to make a pledge online. If you're a company that's ambitious about its sustainability goals and that wants to make a change, there's different networks where you can pledge your targets. We've got the SME Climate Hub, which is aligned with the United Nations. And I believe the UK government is very supportive of this Climate Hub, as it's very much focused on SMEs and smaller organizations. We go a lot with this platform when talking to our SMEs about their targets. So you've got a pledge in this platform to halve your emissions before 2030, to achieve net zero before 2050, and also to share your annual progress. Just a note on this, and it's something I didn't mention before, but when you set a target, it's not necessarily set in stone. It's something that you can always revisit if you see that you're getting closer to it than expected, or that you're actually struggling a bit to get closer to that target. It's something that you can reestablish and reassess as you go. Another platform where you can pledge your ambitions and your targets is the Science Based Targets Initiative. So this is, it's very inclined towards corporates, but a lot of SMEs also make pledges on this platform. This one is very much focused on net zero. So what I was talking about before, reducing your emissions up to 90% by 2030 or 2050, and then you can choose to offset the rest of those emissions. And finally, I just thought it'd be helpful to show how a net zero journey can look like. This is a report we wrote for one of our organizations in an energy audit report. So the company started with these emissions just within their energy. So this would be scopes 1 and 2, if you remember the scopes I mentioned before. And these are just some of the initiatives that we suggest that they could implement just within their energy to reduce their emissions year by year. And then with their plans to achieve net zero by 2030, as you'll see, they would start from 3,564 and get down to 356. That's a 90% reduction of emissions, and the rest can be offset, of course. So that's what I've got in terms of content. I know it's been very carbon heavy. I'm just gonna go into some of the events that we've got going on in the next few weeks to show how we break down this sort of content into different weeks and in a more paced out manner. And then I can open the floor for questions if anyone has anything they'd like to ask. So these are some of the events we've got going on this month. We just started our cohort 3 of support, which means that we've opened up applications. We're taking new people in. If you yourself or anyone you know might be interested in joining the program, we're very happy to take them and have them join the sessions. I will say, where we mention our eligibility criteria, where businesses aren't eligible because they're too small or too large, they're still welcome to attend our webinar sessions, because at the end of the day, they're online, we have them on Zoom, and we really don't mind having any extra people join those sessions. They're very educational, and I think they really equip our businesses with some of that base knowledge to then face their sustainability targets. So this session, we had our welcome set this week. Apologies, we had our welcome session. We're gonna be looking into measuring your carbon footprint tomorrow, and next week we'll look at your biggest impacts. So literally what I just explained to you in maybe 10 minutes, we'll be breaking it down in 3 weeks. And then on the 26th, we've got a live event. it's a leadership workshop, and we'll be talking about how to get your team together and drive them forward in their sustainability targets, and how to really sharpen your skill to drive forward your net zero engagement with them. This has been a very popular workshop in person. We've had a lot of people give really good feedback, and it's a really good way of getting together, meeting other people in the program, and not only that, but also learning some new skills and taking them back with you to your team. So with that being said, I'll let you guys ask some questions. I can't really see the chat from here, so if Mark or Charlie, you'd like to just point out if anyone's asking anything.
Yeah, there isn't a chat, so I guess
Perfect.
any questions or comments from the floor. Also, maybe if you put your cameras on as well, maybe have a bit of a discussion.
Okay, I'll just put my hand up. Hi, Martha. Thank you so much. You gave a really good presentation, and you broke things down in a simple way so everyone can understand. Really appreciate that. At Greenwich, we are looking to support small to medium-sized businesses going forward, and your organisation has just gone one step ahead of what we were planning. I was just wondering what your capacity is. If you have a lot of Greenwich businesses coming on board, we have thousands. What if they all rush? Can you support them?
I would say that would be a great problem to have, to have thousands of businesses interested in sustainability. At the moment, our capacity for cohort 3 is, I think, 130 businesses. This is the last leg of the program. So that's what we have left in terms of funding to support that number of businesses. We will be looking for more funding to continue the program afterwards. So we finish in March 2025. So we'll be looking to continue the program after that. But until then, we've got 130 spots available.
Right. And the other thing is, you mentioned you provide a badge once they've set their interest and made a pledge. Could that incorporate our logo? I'm just thinking out loud. Would that be something that you might want to work in partnership with?
For sure, we work very closely with local authorities and obviously chambers of commerce and other types of organizations. And if we have some sort of partnership, we'd be happy to introduce your logo and maybe even have a graphic that says, I've participated as part of the Greenwich local authority projects and so on.
Great, it's good to know. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Yeah. Really
Feel free to get in touch or reach out if you want to talk about it as well.
Mercedes.
Hi, my name is Mercedes.
Hi, Mercedes.
I am a Greenwich small business who has actually been on the Green Business Action London course. Gosh, Marta, how many years has it been now? Has it been 2?
Oh my God, I think Mercedes is literally like one of our most engaged businesses. And it's probably been 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, it's been a while now.
Yeah.
And every time there's a new enrollment, I just re-enroll, even though I've done loads of the courses now. But it's just, you can never stop learning. And I always find that I learn something new every time I go on a new webinar. The support has been absolutely amazing. And it's made such a huge difference in my business. So yeah, I definitely urge anybody to sign up if you're eligible. And if you're not eligible, then just sign up just for the webinars, because you will learn so much. Just to give you a bit of a background, so I run a wedding and event business. We decorate weddings and events, planning, on the day coordination. And before I joined the Green Business Action, I was driving a car, and now I drive an electric van. We've reduced our catchment area. So we used to cover all of London, all of Kent, all of Surrey. Now we only cover Southeast London, and we cover the top of Kent, just so that we can keep our carbon footprint low. Yeah, we do quite a lot now, and a lot of it is because of Green Business Action. And our carbon footprint, because we have been using the climate essentials, our carbon footprint has reduced each year since we started in, I think it was 2021. I think it was 2021, yeah. Yeah, but it's really empowering to see that number go down. And you get loads of support, one-to-ones. I've had loads of one-to-ones with Marta as well and other people in the team, and it's just really, really supportive. If you get stuck on anything, there's no judgment if you don't know what you're talking about, which is really important. Yeah, it's just been really, really supportive. So I urge anybody who is eligible to sign up ASAP, and if you're not eligible, then just try and get on those webinars.
Thank you so much, Mercedes, for those super kind words. Totally, Mercedes has been really, really engaged in the program. I think you've come to, at this point, probably every webinar in one or another cohort.
Yeah.
And her company has grown a lot in these past few years. It's been amazing to see it grow and to see you implement new things to get that electric van, which I actually saw outside of the Greener Greenwich Summit. Once we left the room, it was amazing to see her drive away. Like, I'm sustainable, yo. So that was lovely. And the fact that you've also decided to reduce your catchment area so that you can work more locally and still are doing so well and you keep growing is fantastic. So I would say Mercedes and for YA Party is definitely a great example of a company that has taken part in the program. Obviously, we will not take any ownership of any of the growth that Mercedes has done, but we've kind of gone with her through the process, and we keep revisiting her footprint and her plans to reduce it. So it's really exciting also to see what's ahead.
Yeah, it's been amazing. And when I decided to reduce my catchment area, I got so much stick from people like, "Are you crazy? You're not gonna get as much business." But ever since I've done it, I've gotten not only business, but I've also started getting the right type of clients who are interested in sustainability themselves, and are willing to pay more because I'm sustainable. So it's definitely made a great improvement on my business, and plus I don't have to drive as far.
Exactly.
Very good.
That's great.
Next is Ade, did you have a comment or a question?
Oh, well, no, thanks very much, Marta. That's really impressive.
Who are you?
Sorry, am I me? Oh.
No. Introduce yourself as well, Ade.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes. Perfect.
Right. Okay. Yes. Marta, thanks very much. That's really helpful. Just one thing: when you businesses come for help with a carbon footprint, so in terms of the methodology, do you basically use a cost approach, or do you use the scientific approach? And if that, what are you finding in the marketplace in terms of the demands, especially comparing sort of medium-sized businesses to corporates?
Okay. Good question. Thank you, Ade, for asking it as well, and nice to meet you. So we use a mix of the kind of finance-based approach, but we also use a scientific approach to it. Obviously, with this carbon footprint that I was explaining before, you can't really just assume what the footprint of something would be. There is scientific figures and calculations behind basically everything that you do as a business. So if you say, this year I purchased this marker, there will be a sort of calculation that goes behind, what's the materials that go into it, how was it manufactured, all of those goes into then calculating that footprint. And we do need to follow a rigorous approach. We can just follow, any old number that comes up online. We need to follow the greenhouse gas protocol, it's called, and those people established the figures that we need to follow for our calculations. That being said, with that scientific side of things, we do try to focus a lot on the financials, just because with smaller organizations, that's really, really important, or with any organization, to be fair. And so with those calculations, we can then say, okay, knowing that, what's the main thing that you spend on, that you spend money on as a business? Is it in markers? Is it in your electricity bill? And taking that more impact-led approach, we can then make those calculations and assume those results and then make a strategy. When you were asking for corporates,
Sorry, I can't hear you. I lost
can you hear
audio.
me?
I can hear you.
Oh, sorry. I can't.
Is it maybe
You
your
mean-
volume? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, and I can hear you, Martin.
Okay.
I hear you fine as well, Martin.
Oh, all right.
Okay, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, lovely. No, but I was just gonna finish that with saying, in terms of what we've seen with corporates, medium and smaller organization, we don't really work with corporates within the program because we believe they might have the funds or the capacity to cover this type of support themselves. But with medium versus smaller organization, whenever there's a will, there is a way. And we know we have a lot of very passionate people. For instance, Mercedes, who just very kindly spoke, she leads a very small organization and she's been really passionate through the process. It's definitely more challenging for smaller businesses. So when we have businesses that might have 60, 70, 100 members in their team, it's much easier to ask one person to attend these webinars. When it's just two of you, it might not be. We do provide recordings for all of our sessions. We have our slides and our resources so that if you can't make them on time, you can always look at them at your own pace. So the pattern has been that we very much see leadership through those people that are very passionate, because there isn't really a standard in place for SMEs yet as to what you should be reporting on, what your plans should be. It's very much led by individuals that care about sustainability, or individuals that might be applying for those contracts and those trying to get those clients that I was talking about before. I do think that the trend is changing and more people are getting involved in the sustainability movement, just because the wider public is asking for it more and more. And as Mercedes mentioned as well, having that, being able to say, I'm a sustainable business, or I operate locally, I only buy from, I don't know, we work with butchers that only work with UK-based farmers, for instance. That's really something that sells your brand, and that can really help you get more clients and step away from the rest of the crowd, I guess I would call it. I don't know, Adi, if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. I mean, I suppose what I was, because when you mentioned the financial approach, I was just sort of reflecting on a piece of work that I've done for, roughly about 5 different corporations. You're talking 50 million turnover and above. And it's interesting because actually where they spend more money. So if you take transportation, for example, where they have fleet of vehicles, they're in the CapEx, they're spending a lot of money, to buy those, if you like, low emission vehicles. And when you start to make the comparison in terms of the carbon footprint, and you compare that to, say, for example, the gray fleet, you'll find that even though in terms of on the balance sheet is huge cost, but when you look at the carbon implications, the carbon footprint, sometimes, it's about 75% reduction. So, whilst for a small business, that sort of analogy might not necessarily apply, so one can get away with using the financial cost base, but with a lot of the corporate where they can buy in, where they have sufficient capital to buy in those renewables or those low cost, technology equipment, vehicles, then actually, that's where one has to be careful in terms of the interpretation, and which is why I sort of, I wanted to get a sense of what impact you see, or how you then cycle, how you then sort of ameliorate the difference in terms of where you work with small business and where you work with corporates applying the financial metrics.
Yes, of course. Well, every recommendation that we make obviously has to consider the capacity and the resources of the company. As I mentioned before, we also always try to find funding on the side of our recommendations. If you tell a high street restaurant you should really invest in solar panels, but they have no clue how to pay for them, they're probably not going to do it. So we try to work with local authorities where there's funding available to try to help with that and help them apply for those grants. So to see if they can actually invest in that without putting much of their own capital into that investment. And where that's not a possibility, there's a lot of things that a company can also do to reduce their emissions. We've worked with people that have just bought LEDs, for instance, which, you know, it is an investment, but it isn't as dear, and they've made a very big change to their energy consumption and to their emissions as well. So we always try to keep in mind what the company can afford. Sometimes the company will come to us saying, actually, I have this budget and I want to spend it on this. So those are really exciting projects, but the reality is that a lot of companies don't really have that, that capacity.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ali. We've probably got 5 minutes left for questions and comments. Hilary, you've had your camera on a little time. Did you have anything you want to ask? Or
Thanks. It's been really interesting. I'm a one-man band, and I, you know, I'm my big costs are my IT consumption. I work from home and I travel by train. Occasionally I have to travel by plane, but
yeah,
that's a big one. But you know, last year I had a few business trips to near Geneva, and I took the train. Took me a day instead of half a day, but I just sat on the train and worked. So I haven't done the detailed calculation. I'm leaning in towards yeah, I coach leadership and teamwork, and I've done a session for one large organization on how do you connect innovation and sustainability. So using sustainability not just to reduce costs, but actually to drive innovation and to become you know, more marketable, because in so many ways. So it's helping leaders and teams to think like that. But I was just really interested to hear a bit more about how you're doing this, and I might well sign up to join some of the webinars. I won't be able to join all of them. And the face-to-face session with another leadership coach, I'd always be interested to see what other coaches are doing, but you might not have space for non-eligible people to sit in on that. But no, it was really useful and really interesting to hear. So, you know, probably the main thing that will happen with me vis-a-vis your program is I'll probably refer some people. That'll probably be the key thing that'll happen.
Well, we'd be very grateful for that, and thank you, Hilary, for that introduction. I think a lot of the times businesses like you are already making some conscious choices that are something like taking the train instead of taking the plane, that a lot of the times maybe we don't talk about enough. Or if you have a website and you could have a little note on some of the practices that you do. It doesn't always have to be a massive project that you undertake, especially as a one-man band. But I think it's always good to know your suppliers and the people you work with are conscious about that.
Exactly. Do you have space for Hilary on the 26th of September?
Yeah, come
Okay.
over.
Okay, great.
You can steal the info and then do a webinar for the South East London Chamber, maybe. Helen.
Right. Wearing my chamber hat, as president have said, what I'd like to do, and I'm sure, Mark, you'll mention this in a minute, but hearing Hilary about his travel, that segues into our webinar that we're having, aren't we, on everyone can compile their own green travel plan. And that's on Wednesday, the 20th of November.
It is, yeah.
At 10 o'clock.
Yeah. So
you'll be able to complete that, Hilary, do your own travel plan, because you've done most of it.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's establishing your green credentials, and you can say you have your own green travel plan on your website. So that's the plug.
Sure.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I can't make the 20th, but will it be
Be
recorded?
recorded, yes.
Perfect. I'll sign up for that and then.
Okay.
What-
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
And just in the, I've noticed obviously there's Ros from Judge and Priestley. Have you got anything to add, or Leon or Mark, another Mark? Are you still there? Just obviously picking on you, but okay. It's like, well, I think, yeah, I think. Well, thank you to Mercedes. That's Mercedes. Well, thanks to Mercedes as well, but thanks to Marta. Sorry. And just with obviously with just add to and obviously if you want to sign up to in fact if you want to sign up to Green Business Action London, how do we do it? Do you need to send out a link, or
I'll put the link in the chat so
in the
that
chat? There's no chat.
There's no chat.
there's no chat. I
no
will be
chat?
sending the link around.
Yes.
If you want, Mark and Charlie, I can send it over to you along with the slides.
Yeah.
If that would be helpful. Our website is greenbusinessaction.com. So you'll also find the apply button there very easily, and all of our information as well. So that's greenbusinessaction.com.
And again, that's another thing. In order to continue the funding or get the funding, you're also keen to understand how many people are engaged with the program.
Exactly. So actually, if you are eligible and you are interested in partaking in the program, we can count this as your kind of first engagement with us and as the first step in your process, because we need a registration form and some extra information. I'm very happy to take that conversation offline and onboard you. For example, Hillary, if you're interested, very happy to onboard you onto the rest of things that we can do. But I'd be very, very keen to count this session as a first session in the program for sure.
And I guess to pick up Nahida's comment, I guess I'll link you both up. I think you met George at the Green and Greenwich Summit, who Nahida worked with. That's okay, Nahida?
Yeah, I'd love to touch base with you. That'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And obviously, I guess your target GBA is 10,000 businesses by
2030.
So we can do most of those in Greenwich. That'll be great. So just to finish off. So obviously, Helen's already given a plug for the next in the kind of the next of the series of the green webinars. So the how to develop a green travel plan is on the 20th of November as part of the guest of the Wednesday webinars. But clearly, obviously, there are lots of other events on at the chamber, and obviously check out our new website. But things that I've been asked to highlight are, if you're looking at cybersecurity, Brian Altamasum, some of you may know, is running a session on third-party risk on Tuesday, the 24th of September, from 10 to 11. And obviously, again, you can sign up on the website. There's Greenwich Office Drinks Grant Source Solicitors, and that's on Thursday, 10th of October, starting at 6 o'clock. And then on the Thursday, 24th of October, we have an executive lunch with Howard Dorber, who most of you probably know is the Deputy Mayor for Business and Growth. So Howard's going to come and see us, a good opportunity to understand also what's going on from a wider perspective. And also Howard's kind of linked in some way, isn't he, to the discussion around Green Business Action London, because obviously that's part of his focus. So so I guess again, thanks very much to Marta. And any more final comments or questions before we?
Quick thing. I just had a quick look on the SEL website to look at the greener travel. Look up the greener travel plan info.
Yeah.
I couldn't see it on there.
Yes, it should be. It's on the. It's under November, so it goes like September, October, November.
Oh, November. Okay,
Yes,
sorry,
November.
I thought it was 20th of September. Okay,
November, yeah.
Okay, great.
Oh, very good. Okay, and that's with Simon Earp. So if you came along to the Green and Greenwich Summit, Simon, like Marta gave had his 5 minutes of fame to talk about Green Travel Action Plan. Now we're giving him a slightly bit longer to talk about it and go into more detail.
And Mark, remind us who's he? Is he? I've forgotten. Is he the University of Greenwich or the National Maritime Museum?
He's University of Greenwich, so
Right.
he's part of the team there. So he's developing a green travel plan for the University of Greenwich. So clearly targeted at slightly larger organizations, but still, again, as today, still relevant for smaller organizations. Should give you a nugget, something to think about. So great. So
You might join as well.
yeah, well, yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, everyone's welcome. So right, so you've got 2 minutes back of your life. So go away, get a cup of coffee, and before your next Zoom
Lovely.
or Teams. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, everyone.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mark,
Okay.
for having me.
Cool.
Bye bye.